nothing is true. Everything is permitted. Welcome to Simple Rut, and if you hadn't guessed by the quote at the beginning, starting an Assassin's Creed build. Now the base for that build is going to be the Jonsbo MOD5. Now, figured I would take a video to kind of go over the case itself before we really kick into doing, well, any of the modifications and any of the changes, the build in general, right? So here's the stock case. Now the case is 25 tall, and then you've got about 23.5 deep, and, well, I should say wide, 23.5 wide, and 10.5 deep. So it's a rather big case, and, well, I'm going to kind of make it bigger, taller. So in the stock configuration, we'll just discuss liquid cooling while we're at it. You have enough room for 360 up front, 360 on the bottom, and a 240 on top. There are no 140 fans in this whatsoever. Now on the bottom, you have to go rather thin, right? I think you can do a 30 millimeter. With this all being said, all that the website tells you is 360, 360, 240. No specs on top of that. Doing my rough guesstimates and measurements, you can do a 30 on the bottom, probably a 45 with regular 120 fans. Now, mind you, the deeper you go, right, the thicker the rad, the less airflow you've got open up from the bottom. So keep that in mind when you're building. Up top, you have about 30 millimeters from this pan to the top of your motherboard. So, you can fit a radiator up here, which you're kind of limited on thickness when you hit this, but you could go a 30 right here, and then your fans up top, or vice versa, right? The front, the way it is set up, you do have all of this room right here. So you can go pretty thick. You can probably hit maybe the 360 Monster, 80 millimeter thick. And then you can push-pull on top of that because you have room for fans in front of the bracket and fans inside of it. Now I'm gonna have to kind of do some B-roll type footage to really get you in here to see everything, but we'll keep it basic. Now the front, you've got your standard I/O setup, I guess you'd call it. You got your two USB-A, USB-C, and your headphone and your mic. Power button up here. As you can see here in a second, there's no button. Why? Because I created a custom one. Of course, why wouldn't we go custom? You do have 4 millimeter thick tempered glass. Now, I do really like the look of it. I'm not a fan of the solid on the front. Now, with that being said, you do have plenty of a gap to really get airflow in there. So it's not hindering as much as you would think. With that being said, I do have a new one that I've designed that I'm really excited for. And by a new one, I mean I designed 7 and then decided on the 6th one that I wasn't going ridiculous enough and went over the top for the 7th and really like it. With this being an Assassin's Creed build, most of those designs do incorporate the logo or multiple logos pulling from a few of the different games. Now all the tempered glass are just held in with thumb screws. These ones are male, these ones are female, so that you can kind of stick it up there on the rod and you're not like floating it too much. Might give you a better idea with the glass off, how you've got your setup. And as you can see, it was never really even optional for a 140, right? They're very distinct on where you're putting your 120s, and there's not even a whole lot of room for adjustment. So that's a little disappointing. It's rather straightforward. They do have kind of a general build design in mind. So as you can see here, you've got just your standard ETX motherboard setup. You do have a little extra width, so you could go eATX, and really, I mean, with the way the wire or the cable routing is, you can kind of go as wide until you hit this guy, because you can really find ways of hiding that cable somewhere else. Well, hiding. There's nowhere to really hide in this case. One thing they did do that I'm kind of getting rid of, but it could be utilized quite well, is you've got mounting points for solid states and hard drives for the backside, which is pretty cool if you're using any of that. This case is like 5 years old, so it was a lot more common back then. I know nowadays all of my builds are pretty much NVMe, and a lot of the builds I see are as well. You've also got this extra bracket that I already took out that goes right in here on the inside. Now it's set up to mount pumps, or you can mount another 2.5. So with that being said, I think you can get 3 2.5s, or you can do 2 3.5s and a 2.5 too. So a decent amount of storage for a rather open case. Now what limits you from doing push-pull on the bottom on the radiator, right, because you are rather open, the issue is it's also where your power supply mounts. So that eliminates that room for a fan. You got this bracket up front that can be removed and put a fan there. So you could do 4 fans on the bottom. You'd have to have a really short, no, wouldn't even be possible. Scratch that. So you can do 4 fans. You couldn't do a 5th, because no matter what, your power supply is going to hit. Even if you do a SFX, it's still just, it's going to cover too much to another fan. Now another feature this case has, you do have RGB lighting that's already built in on this front guy. So this side will have lighting. For some reason they did not put it on the back, which I think would have been cool to have it on both, right? You know, glow on both sides. But if this side is up against a wall, then it glowing is not really going to matter. And with the hard drives and SSDs, you know, chances are you're going to want to hide this side, but it's tempered glass, so of course it's meant to show. Now, as I mentioned, the PSU down here, your cables can kind of come in and out through here. So you could cable route in a way that hides all of your crossovers and that down here, so it is really clean for what you do see. Just something to keep in mind when you're building. Now these, I already took the screws out, so don't be alarmed when it just pops off, but all of these do come off, which is real nice. Really opens up a lot of room for building. As you can see, RGB wiring is set up in there already. Now my favorite part about this entire case is the fact that every single panel comes apart with screws, right? There's no drilling through rivets or rib nuts or anything like that. It's just all screwed together. With it being aluminum for the most part, you do have the potential of wearing out threads over time, right? You've got steel screws, aluminum sheet. In time, you can break down those threads to where your screws might not hold as well. So that is something to keep in mind if you do keep taking it apart and putting it back together. But this thing is ideal for the custom paint job, because you can break it down to each individual piece and paint it. I mean, you could rainbow this thing out to where every part's a different color. It's quite useful, and you know, for the design work that I did, it was helpful to be able to take these down, because then I could make my own parts to replace them. So if I wanted to increase radiator thickness, I just do taller feet, you know, stuff like that. So you can, it is a creative case, but it opens up the ability to be even more creative. Now, the price point. I paid $480. So give or take on when you're buying it, on what that price looks like. It is a premium cost. The I think a lot of that comes down to the sheet metal, the tempered glass, and the unique build of it, right? It's not your standard stamped sheet metal cases, you know, it's not a box, right? So it is going to be a little more cost into making these parts. I think I gathered everything, right? I don't know that I missed stuff. I probably did. There's a lot to go over. Oh yeah, that is one thing I missed. You can put a fan here, and in fact, I don't think there's anything stopping you from putting a slim 120 radiator and a fan here without any modifications, right? So I guess technically you could get 4 radiators, 2 360s, a 240, and a 120. And on top of that, you know, you could push and pull in the front, so 6 fans, 9 fans, 10, 11, 12 fans standard, right? Cool if you plan on going air, right? Open frame, plenty of room for air to move around and cross over components. It's not going to be the same as a closed box, right? You can't fully force airflow in certain directions just because there is going to be leak off around the panels. But with that being said, you can still direct it pretty close to where you want it. Now my plans going forward. As I mentioned, I am doing an Assassin's Creed build. I'm going to be walking you guys through what I'm doing in the build. The only part you're not going to see is all the design work, and that's because I haven't really figured out a good way of recording that work for you guys. Eventually, I would like to bring my SolidWorks design into video and go through that stuff, but right now I can't do it in a way that looks good. So I do plan on going over the top as possible. In fact, just as kind of pique your interest, I am going with the Z790 formula. I love the 690. I wanted to go, you know, 13900 KS there for a long time. I'm currently on a 9900 KS, so I am getting a little outdated on my PC. Video editing, that is my bottleneck, really, is the processor. That being said, I am going 14900K unless they do a KS that's, well, that's worth it, right? I don't know that it will be, but there's kind of a sneak peek at what you have to expect. I am going custom paint. Everything you see will probably be painted. Even though the white and the black looked really good, I want to kind of stretch my capabilities in painting, and I want to learn new ways of painting. So we'll see how it turns out. That being said, you know, don't forget to like and subscribe. Throw some comments down below, ask questions, you know, what would you do in this case if you had it? And with that, it's a wrap.